When God sends you someone, "Hey there, friend. I want to talk to you about something I believe has the power to change your life. Something that's not by chance, but by divine design." Have you ever had someone walk into your life at just the right moment? Someone who helped you when you were struggling, or maybe showed you a perspective you'd never considered before. Maybe you didn't even realize it at the time, but that person was sent to you for a reason. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, that's just a coincidence, or that's just the way things happen. But what if I told you that those moments are far from random? What if I told you that God, in His infinite wisdom, is sending people into your life to help you grow, to guide you, and sometimes even to challenge you? Stick with me for a moment, because I'm about to share some stories, reflections, and insights that could open your eyes to something deeper. When God sends you someone, whether it's a mentor, a friend, or even a complete stranger, it's never just a fleeting encounter. There's purpose behind it, and that's what we're diving into today. Let's get right to it, because I believe this could change the way you view every person who crosses your path from now on. Part 1. The concept of divine timing. Now, let's talk about something very important: timing. God's timing, to be exact. See, we often think we're in control of everything in our lives, right? We plan, we make decisions, we set goals, and we move toward them as quickly as we can. But what if I told you that God's timing is something entirely different? What if I told you that when He sends someone into your life, it's not about when you expect it, but when He knows you need it the most? Let me share a quick story from the Bible. Think about the story of Ruth and Naomi. Naomi had lost everything, her husband, her sons, and found herself in a hopeless situation. But God, in His perfect timing, sent Ruth into her life. Ruth was not only a companion to Naomi, but she was the key to her redemption. Ruth's decision to stay with Naomi wasn't a coincidence. It was God's timing at work, and through that timing, Naomi's life was transformed. And I want you to hear this: God's timing doesn't always make sense to us. Sometimes we might feel like we're stuck in a season of waiting or confusion, but the truth is, God is always at work, preparing us for what's next. Maybe that person He's sending your way hasn't come yet because you're not quite ready for them. Or maybe they've already arrived, but you're not seeing them clearly because your timing and His are on different schedules. I know it's hard to trust this sometimes. I've had those moments in my own life when I was impatient, wanting answers now, but looking back, I can see how perfectly everything aligned when it was meant to. Whether it was someone to guide me, encourage me, or even challenge me to become a better version of myself, it all happened at the right time, not mine, but His. So, my friend, when God sends you someone, trust that His timing is flawless. Even if it doesn't make sense right now, His plan is bigger than we can imagine. And that person is coming, or is already here, right on time. Part 2. Recognizing God's messenger. Okay, now that we've touched on timing, let's talk about something just as crucial: recognizing who God is sending into your life. You see, not everyone who crosses your path is sent by God, but when someone is, it can be life-changing. And here's the thing: sometimes they don't look like what we expect. Take a moment to think about some of the people in your life. Have you ever met someone who seemed to show up out of nowhere, but somehow they knew exactly what you needed to hear? Or maybe they offered you a helping hand when you were at your lowest. That wasn't a coincidence. That was God sending a messenger. Let me give you another story from Scripture. Think about Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. Now, in that time, Jews didn't associate with Samaritans. It was a cultural barrier. But Jesus, being who He is, didn't care about that. He saw her, not as the world saw her, but as someone in need of His love and guidance. And through that encounter, Her entire life was changed. Jesus didn't just see her. He saw her potential. And he didn't care about the labels the world placed on her. Now, here's where we often get it wrong. We're quick to judge people based on appearances, or their past, or even our own biases. But when God sends someone, we have to be open to seeing them as He sees them, not as the world sees them. They might not fit the mold of what we think they should be. They might not look the way we expected, but their purpose in your life is real, and their message is true. I've had moments in my own life when someone came into my life, and at first, I wasn't sure why they were there. Maybe they were too different, too unexpected. But looking back, I see how God used them to shape me, to teach me something, or to encourage me when I needed it most. And you know what? It wasn't just any person. It was someone God sent, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. So, how do you recognize God's messenger? It starts with prayer. It starts with listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Ask God to open your eyes to see people the way He sees them. Don't judge based on appearances or first impressions. Trust that God is at work in ways we often can't comprehend, and He knows exactly who and what we need. And let me remind you, sometimes, God sends someone into your life not to be your friend forever, but to teach you a lesson. It might not be about long-lasting friendship. It might be about a brief encounter that changes your heart, your mindset, or even the direction of your life. And that's okay. Every person who God sends has a purpose, whether it's for a season or a lifetime. Part 3. The spiritual meaning behind relationships. All right, now let's take this a step deeper. You see, when God sends someone into your life, it's not just about the casual encounter or the convenience of having another person around. No, it's much more profound than that. There's spiritual meaning behind every relationship, and if we open our hearts, we can learn so much from these connections. Let me give you a real-life example. Think about the relationship between David and Jonathan. The Bible describes their bond as one of the deepest friendships ever recorded. Jonathan, despite the fact that he was the son of King Saul, David's greatest adversary, saw something in David that others didn't. Their friendship was built on trust, love, and faith in God's plan. And it was through their relationship that both of them were able to grow in ways they couldn't have on their own. Now, when I think about relationships, I can't help but wonder how many people God has sent into my life to teach me something, or to help me grow in my walk with Him. You see, God often uses the people around us as mirrors to show us who we are, our strengths, our weaknesses, our potential. Every relationship is a chance for you to learn something new about yourself and about God's love. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you been in a difficult relationship or a challenging situation with someone? And after some reflection, you realized it was an opportunity for growth. Maybe that person taught you patience when you thought you couldn't be patient anymore. Or maybe they showed you how to forgive when it felt impossible. Here's the thing. God doesn't always send easy people into our lives. Sometimes He sends us people who challenge us, who bring out parts of us we didn't know were there. And those relationships, as difficult as they may seem in the moment, are opportunities for us to lean into God's grace and learn how to love like He loves us. Now, I know this can be tough, especially when you're dealing with people who hurt you or people who seem to drain your energy. But I want to encourage you to see them through God's eyes. Even the tough relationships can be a part of His plan. Sometimes, these relationships are the ones that shape us into the person we're meant to be. They refine us, they humble us, and they teach us to rely on God's strength rather than our own. So, when God sends someone into your life, whether they're there to encourage, challenge, or guide you, recognize the spiritual meaning behind that relationship. It's not just about what you can get out of it, but what God wants to teach you through it. Part 4. The power of divine appointments. Now, this is where it gets really exciting. Divine appointments. These are those moments in life where everything seems to line up in perfect timing, and you can't help but wonder, was this a coincidence, or was this orchestrated by something greater? I believe that when God sends someone into your life, it's often not just a casual encounter. It's a divine appointment, a moment in time that has been set aside for a specific purpose. And these divine appointments can change the course of your life in ways you can't even imagine. One of the most powerful examples of a divine appointment in the Bible is when the Apostle Paul met the Philippian jailer. Paul was imprisoned, and yet, through God's timing, a powerful encounter took place between him and the jailer. The jailer, who had been guarding Paul, ended up accepting Christ after witnessing a miraculous event. And this encounter didn't just change the jailer's life, it impacted his entire household. Now, you might not always see the miraculous in your own life, but divine appointments are still happening all around you. Maybe you meet someone who offers a word of encouragement just when you're about to give up. Maybe you're introduced to a mentor who changes the way you approach your career or your relationships. Or maybe, just maybe, you encounter someone who challenges you to think about your faith in a new light. I can't tell you how many times in my own life I've looked back and thought, that moment was meant to be. There have been conversations that, at the time, seemed like nothing special. But years later, I realized that they were part of God's perfect plan to lead me to where I am today. Those moments didn't just happen. They were orchestrated by God, and I believe He's doing the same thing in your life. Divine appointments are not always glamorous. Sometimes, they happen in the most ordinary places, in the grocery store, on a bus, or even in a moment of crisis. But when you recognize that God is at work, even in the smallest moments, your perspective shifts. You start to see that nothing in your life is random. Every encounter, every conversation, and every person who crosses your path is part of God's greater plan for you. So, how do you know when you're having a divine appointment? It's about paying attention. It's about being in tune with God's presence in your life. And it's about having the faith to trust that He is guiding you, even in the moments that seem insignificant. When God sends you someone, it's often part of a divine appointment that will shape your future in ways you can't yet comprehend. Part 5. The challenge of recognizing the right people. Now, as much as we talk about the people God sends into our lives, there's an important reality we must face. Not every person who crosses your path is sent by God. It can be hard to discern who is truly a part of His plan and who is just someone passing through. This is where we need to be discerning, prayerful, and open to God's guidance. Let me tell you something I've learned over the years. It's not always easy to recognize the right people right away. We all have biases, judgments, and preconceptions that cloud our ability to see someone for who they truly are. But God doesn't send people based on how we perceive them. He sends people based on what we need. And sometimes, that can look different than what we expect. Think about the story of the Good Samaritan. A man was beaten and left for dead on the side of the road, and several people passed by without helping him. But a Samaritan, someone considered an outsider by the Jews, was the one who showed mercy. In that moment, the Samaritan was the right person, even though he didn't fit the mold of who everyone thought should be helping. This story is a powerful reminder that the people God sends our way may not always match our expectations. They may not look like us, act like us, or have the same background. But God is not looking at the surface. He's looking at the heart. So how do we discern who is right for us? It starts with prayer. It starts with asking God for clarity and wisdom in each relationship. And it requires humility to trust that God might send someone who challenges us, someone who isn't easy to love or understand, because in doing so, we grow. Sometimes the right people are the ones who push us to be better versions of ourselves, even if it's uncomfortable. And here's another thing to remember. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some are there for a season. They serve a specific purpose, whether it's teaching you a lesson, giving you support during a difficult time, or helping you discover something about yourself. Recognizing who is meant to be in your life long-term and who is there for a season requires wisdom and prayerful discernment. I'll be honest with you. There have been people I've allowed into my life that I later realized weren't sent by God. And there were moments when I held on to relationships longer than I should have because I didn't trust God's plan. But once I learned to lean into prayer and trust in God's wisdom, I started to see relationships more clearly. And I realized that when I let go of the wrong people, God made space for the right ones. So when you feel unsure, don't rush. Take the time to pray, reflect, and ask God to guide you. Trust that He knows what's best for you. And when the right people come into your life, you'll know it. It will be peaceful, purposeful, and aligned with God's will. Part 6. The impact of God's people in our lives. Let's talk about the incredible impact that God's people can have on our lives. I believe one of the greatest gifts we receive from God is the people He sends our way. Whether they're there for a short time or a lifetime, they shape us in ways we can't always understand at first. When you look back at the most significant moments in your life, I bet you'll realize that they often came through people, friends, family members, mentors, or even strangers. God uses people to carry His love, His wisdom, and His support to us, and it's through those relationships that we experience transformation. For example, think about the relationship between Jesus and His disciples. Those men were transformed by Jesus in profound ways. They walked with Him, learned from Him, and saw firsthand what it meant to live a life of love and service. But it wasn't just about Jesus giving them lessons. It was about their relationship with Him and the way He helped them grow into the people they were meant to be. I believe that every person God sends into our lives is meant to impact us in some way. Sometimes their influence is direct. They teach us, they guide us, they mentor us. Other times, it's more subtle. Maybe they help us see something about ourselves that we didn't know, or they show us a new perspective that changes our way of thinking. God uses people to stretch us, challenge us, and build us into the people He designed us to be. I've had people in my life who have shaped me in ways I can't even put into words. There were moments when I didn't think I could go on, and it was the right person, at the right time, who spoke the words of encouragement I needed. There were times when I was facing decisions I couldn't navigate alone, and God sent a mentor who walked with me, giving me wisdom that only came from their experience and faith. But here's the thing, it's not just about what we receive, it's also about what we give. As much as God sends people into our lives to help us grow, He also calls us to be that person for someone else. Every encounter, every relationship, is an opportunity to reflect God's love and wisdom. Whether it's a word of encouragement, a moment of support, or simply being present when someone needs you, we are called to be a source of light and love in the lives of others. So as you think about the people God has placed in your life, I want you to reflect on how they've impacted you. Maybe they've challenged you to grow in your faith. Maybe they've shown you what true love looks like. Maybe they've helped you in a time of crisis. Recognize their impact. And remember, as you go through life, you have the opportunity to be that person for someone else. The truth is, we are all part of a greater tapestry. God is weaving together people, relationships, and moments that bring us closer to His plan for our lives. And every person He sends into our lives, whether for a season or a lifetime, has the potential to change us in ways we may never fully understand. Part 7. letting go of control and trusting God's plan. Let's get real for a moment. Let's talk about control. If you're anything like me, you probably like to have some control over your life, your decisions, and yes, even your relationships. We all want to be in the driver's seat, don't we? But when it comes to the people God sends into our lives, we have to learn to surrender control and trust His plan. It's one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? Letting go and trusting that God knows exactly what He's doing, even when we don't. I've had my share of moments when I tried to control situations, relationships included. I tried to make things happen on my own, tried to keep people around who weren't meant to be in my life, and even held on to certain relationships way too long because I was afraid of letting go. But here's what I've learned. When we try to control relationships and situations, we're essentially saying, God, I know better. But the reality is, He knows far better than we could ever imagine. Think of the Israelites in the desert. They wanted to control their journey, to get to the promised land faster, but God knew the path they needed to take for their growth. His timing wasn't theirs. And in the same way, God's plan for our relationships isn't always the way we'd choose. Sometimes He allows people to come into our lives for a season, and then they must move on. Other times, people are meant to stay and walk with us for the long haul. Here's something to keep in mind. God isn't just shaping your relationships. He's shaping you. The people He sends are tools for your growth, even if it's not always in the ways you expect. When you try to hold on to relationships or force something to work, you might be resisting the work that God wants to do in you. Maybe He wants you to learn to trust, to forgive, or to let go of unhealthy attachments. I know this can be hard. But when you let go of control and surrender to God's plan, something beautiful happens. You start to see people and relationships through God's eyes, and that perspective brings peace. You begin to see that every person who comes into your life, whether they stay for a moment or a lifetime, is part of God's perfect plan for your growth. So I want to encourage you today. Let go of the need to control. Trust that God knows what He's doing. Surrender your relationships to Him, and watch how He works in ways you could never have planned. Part 8. Building a legacy of love and faith. As we start to wrap up, I want to leave you with something deeply important. A legacy. We often think of a legacy as something we leave behind after we're gone. But here's the truth. Your legacy is being built right now, through every relationship, every encounter, and every person God sends into your life. When God sends you someone, there's an opportunity for you to leave a lasting impact on that person, on your community, and even on future generations. The relationships you invest in today shape the legacy you'll leave tomorrow. Let's take a moment to reflect on the life of Jesus. He didn't just come to teach or to heal. He came to build a lasting legacy of love, grace, and salvation. And what did He do? He poured into the lives of His disciples. He invested in relationships, even though He knew that many would eventually fail Him. But He understood the bigger picture. Those relationships would carry on His message long after He was gone. You see, relationships have the power to change not just the people involved, but entire communities. When God sends someone into your life, there's more at stake than just the present moment. It's about the future, too. Every person you encounter has the potential to carry the love, the wisdom, and the lessons you've shared with them, and that ripple effect can last for generations. But here's the kicker. It's not just about what others can give you. It's about what you can give them. Your legacy isn't just about what you take from relationships, but about what you pour into others. Whether it's a word of encouragement, an act of kindness, or simply being there when someone needs you, it all adds up. I remember a mentor of mine telling me something that stuck with me for years. You may never know the full impact you have on someone's life. And that's the truth. Sometimes, we think that the big moments, when we give advice or make a grand gesture, are the ones that matter most. But sometimes, the small acts of love and service are the things that truly make a lasting difference. So what kind of legacy are you building? How are the relationships in your life shaping the future? When God sends you someone, it's not just a fleeting encounter, it's part of a greater story. The way you love, the way you serve, and the way you pour into others will leave an imprint long after the moment has passed. When you think about the people who have impacted you, I bet they didn't leave a legacy of wealth or success. They left a legacy of love, faith, and compassion. That's the kind of legacy we're called to build, a legacy that lives on in the hearts and lives of the people God sends into our path. Conclusion: embracing God's guidance. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want to leave you with one final thought. God is always at work in your life. Every person He sends your way, whether for a season or a lifetime, is part of His divine plan to shape you, grow you, and guide you closer to His heart. Each encounter, every relationship, has purpose and meaning, even when it's not immediately clear. You may not always understand why certain people come into your life, or why others have to leave. It's easy to question, to feel lost, or to wonder if God's plan is truly at work. But let me assure you, God never makes mistakes. He is the master of timing, and His purpose for your life will unfold as you walk in trust and faith. Remember, you don't have to control every situation, and you don't have to know the answers right away. Trust that God is weaving together your relationships in ways that will bring out the best in you, the lessons you need, and the love you were always meant to give. If you're facing uncertainty or confusion about someone in your life, take a moment to pause, pray, and ask God for wisdom and clarity. He will guide you. I want to encourage you to embrace each person who comes into your life as a potential gift. Some will bring joy and encouragement, others will challenge you and refine your character. But all will be used by God to draw you closer to the person He's calling you to be. And as you walk through life, remember, you are also called to be a divine messenger for others. The love, wisdom, and encouragement you share today could be the very thing that changes someone's life tomorrow. You might never fully know the impact you have on others, but rest assured, when you love with the heart of God, your legacy will be one of love, grace, and faith that lasts beyond your time here. So as we close, I want to pray for you. I pray that God opens your eyes to see the divine appointments in your life, the relationships He has placed in your path, and the love He is calling you to offer. I pray that you have the courage to trust His timing, to embrace the people He sends, and to walk confidently in His plan for your life. Thank you for joining me today. If you've been blessed or encouraged, don't forget to share this message with someone who might need it. And remember, you are never alone in this journey. God is with you, and He's guiding every step of the way. Until next time, may God bless you abundantly, and may you always recognize the beauty and purpose in every person He sends into your life.